Hi, friends. Today's social studies lesson has to do with Dutch trade with Native Americans. So let's just think about that word trade. Trade has to do with the meaning of giving something to somebody and getting something in return from them, right? So that's what trade means. So when we've learned so far that the Dutch came over to what is now New York City, it used to be called New Amsterdam, and I have that here written for you so that you don't forget. It says here, remember that New York City was named New Amsterdam by the Dutch in the early 1600s. Then the English came and took over and renamed it New York, right? So when we talk about New Amsterdam, we're really talking about when the Dutch were here. So what was happening at that time between Native Americans and Dutch. So I'm going to read this to you, and then you can answer the questions after you're done reading this and following along. Okay, so it says here, New York City began as a place for trading in the 1600s. There was a group of traders or merchants in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is a city in the Netherlands in Europe. The traders sent their sailing ships a great distance across the Atlantic Ocean. They traveled all the way to New York City, which they called New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam had an excellent harbor for their ships. A harbor has water that is deep enough for sailing ships. It also has land on many sides to protect the ships from big waves in the ocean. Okay, so there's a picture here, and this is going to be useful to you while you respond to questions and it connects with what's coming up. So it's here, Dutch merchants arriving, looking to trade with the Native Americans. Okay, Dutch merchants traded with Native Americans. Below is the seal, which represents New York City. Okay, so the question here is, look at the seal below. This is the seal, and picture above. So you're going to use this seal and this picture, right? Carefully, look at it carefully and respond to this question. What is something that was traded? There's a big clue. So you're going to have to really look carefully at this seal, which is like a symbol, right? And this picture right here. Look at the pictures carefully. What is something that was traded? Write your answer right here. We're looking for one thing, and then move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so what did you say? Did you say beaver? If you look over here carefully, in this image right here, there's two of them. You can see these two little animals. Those are beavers. And when the Dutch were here during that time, there were a lot of beavers on this land, especially around what is New York now. So you can see that. And if you look at this person right here, this colonist right here, in his hand, you can see that he's holding what is called beaver fur and pelt. That's the tail part right there. So let's continue. And then it says, now watch this video. So hopefully you already tried that and are watching the video. It says here, the Dutch wanted beaver furs. They also wanted timber or wood from Native American land. The Dutch ships left from the harbor at New Amsterdam. The ships sailed back to the Netherlands with thousands of beaver furs. Dutch merchants wanted beaver fur to make hats that were popular in Europe. And this was the type of hat that they would make out of the beaver fur. And what's really interesting is this hat that's made from beaver fur. If you look at pictures from the 17th century, from the 1600s and onwards, the shape kind of changed over time. But this is what it looked like in the early 1600s when they were originally first bringing the fur over, beaver fur, and making hats in the Netherlands. So it says here, Native Americans hunted the beavers. Then they exchanged beaver furs for trade goods from Europe, right? So what are trade goods? Things that the Europeans were bringing over that the Native Americans possibly wanted too, right? Native Americans wanted metal tools made in Europe. They wanted iron knives, axes, copper pots, and rifles. They also wanted woven cloth and wool blankets made in Europe. So the Europeans that were coming over, once they found out that they could trade for the beaver fur and other items and animals, they knew what they needed to take over, and this is what they would bring over. So these are some items that Dutch traded with Native Americans. You can see some metal scissors, some metal rings, some glass beads, and metal arrowheads, right? And so many other things. So those are some things that were traded with the Native Americans. It says here, many European colonists, mainly Dutch, created maps to indicate where they could find beavers. You can see it right over here. They made these maps. Once they started getting really familiar with the land and found out where the Native Americans were hunting for these animals, they started making these types of maps, right? Eventually, the Dutch, including other European colonists, learned how to use Native Americans and their skills in finding beavers and other animals and items to trade. So the colonists were coming over, they were figuring out how to work with the Native Americans to kind of use their skills and their hunting skills to gain what would help them. And then it says here, as colonists learned how to use Native Americans to benefit, that means to make it more helpful for them, their work, they also began to show dominance and treat them unfairly. So now we're talking about power. So we have the colonists coming over to this land, figuring out how to use the skills and use the Native Americans for the fur, but then almost kind of dominating and kind of using their power in a negative way, unfortunately, and treated them unfairly. So this eventually led to conflict between the two groups. So here is the map I just showed you. And so down over here, we have some questions. And the questions are, what does merchant mean, right? What does it mean? And there's a multiple choice here. So you're going to pick one. Where did the merchants come from? What did the Dutch traders want to get from Native Americans? And number 5, what did the Native Americans want to get from the Dutch? And then the last question is kind of like almost like a prediction. Why do you think there was eventually conflict between the two groups? So why do you think there was conflict? I'm going to ask you to kind of focus on this last paragraph over here to get that answer. Okay, enjoy the reading, and you can rewind this anytime and go over it again. And if you have questions, definitely reach out. Okay, bye. Have a good day.